You know, there's an old saying, you never judge a book by its cover. Corny, cliche, whatever. That's true. Our next speaker, Dan Hugill, is like, you look at him and you think, that's a tough son, right?
Right.
I mean, he's got the things, the tattoo, the hair, the chin thing, man. It's like, I don't want to F with him. You read his bio, he's got like jiu-jitsu and kung fu and black belt stuff, man. He's choking the guy out. But then, you know, you open up the book and you're like, what's all this love I see? You open up his heart, you open up his chest, and you see Christ consciousness glowing from it. We were talking about love. We were talking about all these beautiful things, and that's what, I'm not going to get into a story or give you any of things, because he's got an amazing background, amazing story, how he's leading, how he's serving, and really, if we can just crank up the energy one more time for Dan Hugill. He's going to get things rolling here. So
let's go. Hey, thank you.
Oh,
my dear, thank you. Woo-hoo-hoo. My friends, thank you so much. It is an absolute honor to be here. I did not write a bio because I kind of put my little intro into it, because I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself. My name is Dan Hugill. I'm the co-founder of a 501c3 nonprofit organization called The Bridge. We guide people transitioning out of the Department of Corrections to help them get their life back, to help them find purpose. We do that through a lot of fitness stuff, and you're going to kind of see where this ties together in my story. I'm the activities director at a mental health and substance use facility in Colorado Springs called Peaks Recovery Centers. I bring movement and fitness to people to help them with like somatic release and movement, and just to help them as I have been helped on my journey by moving my body. Sorry to get a little goofy, a little wiggly up here. Also, I help with recovery leadership at the Sanctuary Church in Colorado Springs. So a lot of things that are dear to my heart, and I tell you those because it's important for me to explain to you how I got to these different little positions in my life, and that's what I'm going to give you in my story right now. So, you know what I love about God is He turns messes into messages, right? I'm sure you've all heard that before. All right, let's go. I'm going to show you how He turned a mess into a message, and a test into a testimony for me. So, y'all remember where you were at July 23rd, 2014? Oh, okay, that's cool. I mean, I do, but that kind of. That's awesome. That's awesome. So I was a block away from my parents' house, on my face, bleeding everywhere, handcuffed. I had just got caught by bounty hunters. I was on the run for, excuse me, this is the only time I'm going to look at my phone. Dangerous drugs. I had warrants for dangerous drugs, distribution, manufacturing of controlled substances, paraphernalia, again, the dangerous drugs, again, the dangerous drugs, again, the dangerous drugs. I'm listing off all of my felony convictions and my felony charges here. I wasn't convicted of all of these. Assault in the 3rd degree, driving under the influence. Assault, reckless cause of injury. Assault, no reckless cause of injury. Assault, crimes against a person, harassment, strike, shove, kick. Crimes against a person, strike, shove, kick. Identity theft. Identity theft uses info to obtain. Aggravated robbery with a weapon. Failure to appear. Identity theft. Aggravated robbery. Menacing with a weapon. Robbery. Menacing with a weapon. Robbery. Aggravated. Robbery, aggravated wound, strike with a weapon. Menacing victim, a little bit of a list of those. Damage of property, criminal mischief, damage of property, forgery, counterfeiting money. And there's a 4-page list, and I'm going to stop right there. I had several felony warrants, and this is when it all came crashing down. July 23rd, 2014, that morning I woke up. I was staying at my ex-girlfriend's house, just so happened to be that evening because I was on the run. I am a recovering IV meth user and a recovering alcoholic. I woke up that morning shaking because I had to drink a pint of 90 proof peppermint schnapps to get halfway right, to stop the shaking, because you cannot use intravenously when you're shaking as bad as I was. And then once I would use my drugs, I'd be normal. I'm going to come back to that day here in just a minute. I'm going to take you back in time a little bit. I started drinking at the age about 13, 14, right in between my 8th grade and freshman year. First time I got drunk, it was with my buddy. I didn't really know what I was doing. I'm going to tell you, I don't think I ever became a good drinker. I don't think I ever quite figured it out, because the first time that we drank, we got 2 bottles of Goldschlager, 2 big bottles, and 2 bottles of butterscotch schnapps. We got those 7-Eleven big gulp cups. We put the whole bottle into 2 cups and slammed it, and then did that with the other bottle. And I know that could be a little triggering, you know what I'm saying? And we went to the mall. The last thing I remember was puking in the sink in the women's bathroom. And security woke us up, and my friend went to the hospital with alcohol poison. I went to my grandma's house and I pretended that I had the stomach flu because I didn't want my family to know that I was drinking. And I remember hitting my head on the toilet seat, promising Jesus that I would never drink again. Well, I broke that promise, because within a week, I was drinking every day, almost, like weekends. I made a fake ID with some of my buddies. It said, and it expired. My name was the lead singer of a very, very popular old, like, 80s punk rock band, and only one person ever caught it. But so now in high school, I was buying alcohol for everybody at my high school almost every day. I grew up in a Christian household. My parents, they're still together. I love them dearly. And when I've done talks before, I've tried to find these little things about certain childhood traumas, but when I go back, I can't tell you that I had religious trauma. It was never, listen to Jesus or you're going to, it was never anything like that. There was always so much love there. And I think just kind of from that, when I started to get to my rebellious state, I think a lot of it was, I started to get mad at myself. I started to create my own trauma. I'm still exploring the childhood trauma, but I started to be upset with myself. And it got to the point where now I'm drinking, and now maybe I hate myself. I don't feel like I'm good enough. I know that living up to someone like my dad, I love him so much. He's a champion cross-country coach, multiple state champions, honors physics teacher, Crystal Apple Teacher of the Year of the Award. I love this man, and we have a very good relationship to this day, but I think that part of me looking up at him was, I was like, I don't feel like I'm good enough, but it compounded. And it got to a point where drinking in high school, I got so aggressive that I started fighting a lot, and I didn't care, because in my mind, let's fight. What are you going to do? Beat me up worse than I beat myself up? Come get it. You know what I'm saying? So it went into that. And I remember my high school year, I almost got in a fight. We left school, me and my friend. She'd give me a ride to the liquor store so I could go get a ride to my friend's house, and she'd drive me. We had a symbiotic relationship. I could buy her cigarettes, and I'd buy alcohol. And we were going across the street from Coronado High School in Colorado Springs. And there's these 2 carloads of these young gentlemen in there, and I don't know them. I have no reason to have anything against them, but because I'm intoxicated and I have a chip on my shoulder, I walk up and I beat on their window, and I antagonize them until I have about 8 people surrounding me trying to fight, and the high school cop shows up. And we ran, and I left. This is in the days of pagers. I got a page from the school counselor. She's like, Mr. Hugill, you need to come in and talk to me about why you're going to be over there starting fights. This was, I didn't think, don't go back to the school or run away, because my dad was an honors physics teacher at the school that I went to. And I told my buddy, I was like, hey, I have to go back and talk to him. And he's all like, and I was like, I'm trashed. What am I going to do? So he chops up my first line of meth, and that was the first time I ever did meth. And it created a bit of a monster. I began using almost every day. I ended up I almost fought security at high school. I came in drunk, and one of the teachers didn't like some stuff that I wrote on a test paper, and she started cussing at me. And so at this point of my life, if you come at me cussing, I don't care who you are, you're setting the bar of behavior, and I will meet you there. She ended up calling security, and I almost got into a fight with security. They de-escalated me, and they convinced me to walk off the campus, and I left. I ended up going back the next year and graduating from high school. But I had a bunch of free time now. And with this, I started selling drugs. I didn't want to get a job. I started selling meth. And it led to this toxic version of myself. When I say I didn't feel like I was good enough, I wanted to be liked. I wanted people to like me. I wanted to feel like I was good enough, but I couldn't do this. So you know what was almost as good? I'm a drug dealer. I'm a big shot. This toxic thing that comes with that, I'm okay with being feared. And it's like, if I don't know if you like me, you can be scared of me. So that's the way I started to live my life. They started to call me Crazy Dan, and they started calling me Doorman Dan, because there was this one day, one of my guys that I was getting drugs from, he came in and he's all mad and he slams the door, and I'm like, what's wrong? And he's like, man, these dudes owe me money and we can't go get more dope until we go get them. I'm like, who owes you? I jump in his car and we go over to the house, and before we could even stop, I didn't even shut the door. I booted the door in, and we robbed these people. And they started calling me Doorman Dan after that. I also got a job as a bouncer, so it was like I was a doorman and a bouncer. But what I would do is I started doing illegitimate repossessions for drug dealers so that I could get free drugs. It ended up with me a job, like I said, as a bouncer. And this job as a bouncer was a cover-up for me selling drugs, because I would drink more in a night than I'd make money. And the boss was like, as long as you're not too drunk to do your job, you could come in and you could keep doing it. But one of the things you gotta understand about methamphetamine is when you do meth, it kind of cancels out the alcohol. Like you can get to a point where that's not gonna be a thing. Like you can get too much of each, but if you're just like drunk and you use meth, like it'll give you a second wind. I lived like this for 14 years. Wow. For 14 years. And so they're calling me Doorman Dan, and I ended up getting like several of these charges. I remember one of the worst ones is, I'm not going to name the two gentlemen, but in 2014, one of the robbery, we were on the news for armed robbery. What had happened was I was robbing drug dealers because I owed a bunch of people money, and so I just started robbing. I couldn't get any more drugs, so I had one of my buddies. I was like, hey, you know this guy who sells meth? Have him meet us over here. So this gentleman who was helping me lived at a house with a gal, and gal's brother sold drugs. I said, set him up so I can come and I can handle this dude. And me and my two buddies were gonna go get it. So we go up to the house. He comes driving up onto the thing, and this guy that we were gonna rob, he's mad. And my buddy's like putting this box in the back of his car, and me and my other friend, who I'm not gonna name, we're standing by the garage, and I'm looking, and I'm like, the way that this guy just pulled up to go for our buddy, it looks like we're missing something here, because he came out aggressive. The gentleman we were gonna rob gets out of the car and goes walking up to my buddy super fast, and I was like, hold this dude's gonna swing on him. I handed him the bottle of whiskey, and I ran up, and I grabbed the dude, turned him around, and slammed him on the ground. My buddy came up and pistol whipped him. And my other friend, he's like, the guy we intend to rob, my buddy, he's like, Dan, this dude has a gun, find his gun now. I'm like, where's your gun? And we're searching this guy. Remember, his sister lives there? His sister comes out screaming. This is a very upper class neighborhood in Colorado Springs at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She comes running out, grabs me by my shoulders. He yanks me off and is screaming. I get up, I look around, and I'm like, we need to get out of here. So we hop in the car. We go up the cul-de-sac and we turn around, and this guy did have a gun, because he fired 5 shots off. One went through the window, went right in front of my face, hit the hood of the car, and hit the rim of the tire, and the other 2 missed. I just remember saying, drive, and I remember I was like, stop, and there's blood coming out of my face. It was just from the glass from the window. We were okay. But the next day we were on the news for armed robbery, because that was half true. I did lie to the police, and I'm comfortable telling you that because I was charged with this. It all came crashing down on me. We're gonna go back to July 23rd, 2014, the day I got sober. What's that? Oh yeah, go back to July 23rd, 2014, the day that I got sober. So the bounty hunters had just got me. I was laying there, I had to go to the hospital, my hand got peeled back, I got stitches. There's 3 big things in my story that talk about what began my path to healing, and one of them was giving my life back to Christ. I was in the county jail. I just got stitched up, and they have me in the county jail in Colorado Springs. CJC. It is the most spirit-breaking place in the world. They feed you dog food, my friends. It's terrible in there. So I'm in there, and I'm looking at 48 years in prison. That's a long time. So I'm looking at 48 years in prison, and I'm in there, and you know when you have a desperation moment, and you're like, what do I do? And I go back to what I know. And it says in Proverbs, when a child is young, you teach him the ways, and when he grows up, he will not depart from it. So I'm very grateful to my parents for teaching me that, because I didn't depart from it. You know what I did is I grabbed a Bible and I cracked that thing open and I started crying. And with my reputation, you better believe that nobody can see Doorman Dan crying in jail, because once you start to get into a place where you get incarcerated, there's a different set of rules. And if you have a reputation and you're affiliated with several gangs like I am, if you're in there crying, you just better go to the showers and be ready to fight everybody, because you don't show weakness in there. So I pulled the blanket over my head as I'm crying, and it brought me to Psalms 18. Everybody knows who King David is, right? I randomly God showed me, and it was Psalms 18. And King David, this is a psalm that he wrote when he was getting away from Saul. If you know about their relationship, I'm not going to go into it now, but you can look into that. But he was crying out to God, and he was saying, God, come and save me. I'm going to paraphrase this. God says, okay, David, I hear you. I step off and I'm going to hear you. I'm going to get upset. I'm going to ride down on the wings of the wind, or a mighty angelic being, depending on the translation. And it says that bolts of lightning came down and coals and fire came down as God was enshrouded in a cloud. And at the blast of his nostrils, he laid the foundations of the earth bare. He reached down and he pulled me out of deep waters, and he put me in a safe place. I started bawling. I slammed that thing shut. I was like, God, can this be my story? I was like, I'm not a man after your own heart. I am not like King David. I was like, I'm a piece of... Can this be my story? What do I got to do? I surrender. This was my first surrender. This was my first comeback. You know what happened after this? I had all these holds on me because the parole and probation, not parole yet, probation was like, nah, you're not going anywhere, bud. I ended up speaking to my attorney, and the judge, he let me go to a 30-day inpatient rehab in Parker Valley Hope. I went there and I started to be able to get my head back on straight. And it was all great. I started doing a lot of 12-step, and gosh, that third-step prayer where it talks about surrendering your will over to God, that's such a huge thing in my life. So foundationally in my recovery, I got really involved with 12-step. But I'm going to tell you what happened after that is 2014, December 15th, I went in front of the judge. I'm 146 days sober. I have a huge group of people there, 12-step. I took a plea bargain. I took an open plea, because if I would have fought it, I would have got 48 years, because I would have lost for sure, because they had me. I go in front of the judge, and my attorney's like, if you're lucky, you might get 4 to 6, but you have to sell yourself. I still wasn't quite ready to take ownership for what I had done at that point. So I'm in front of him. I'm trying to sell myself, and the judge looks at me. He says, Mr. Hugill, stop. He says, you're a terror to society. He's like 90, 100 days sober. He's like, I don't care. He's like, I'm aggravating your sentence. He's like, you know what? You're looking at 4 to 6. Yeah, but I'm giving you 10 to 12. I'm going to give you 12. Boom. But you know what, Mr. Hugill? I'm going to leave this open for reconsideration. I don't know exactly what that meant, but that was a little bit of hope that I clung on to. I hung on to that hope. And I went to DRDC. I was crying. My 12-step community, my family, my mom, my dad. My mom and my dad were there for me, still to this day, praying for me the whole entire time. I ended up going to DRDC. That's where they find out what prison facility they're going to put you in. And so this is where I had my second surrender. It's a 23-1 lockdown. I was on 20. That means you can come out for an hour a day, and you're locked in a cell for 23 hours. That happened for 2 months. I was transported all over Colorado. And at DRDC, I was up there at 23-1. I was there for like my 3rd week in there. And they did like a little prayer thing. It's like, hey, do you want to go to church? I was like, anything to get out of here. I gave my life back to God. And they did a little altar call. You've probably seen the kind where it's like, hey, do you want to give your life back to the Lord? Or do you want to like come and give your life to him for the first time? And I was just like, yeah, all that. Just let me get all that. All that, I don't know what that looks like. Yes, come give me some Jesus. You know what I'm saying? I went up and it was nothing spectacular. They did the little prayer and they did that. And I was like, I want to give my life back. Cool, whatever. See you later. They gave me a little pamphlet. I went back up to my cell. So I'm up in my cell. I go and I slam the door. I'll never forget. I'll never forget the sound of when the doors would pop open there to take us to the chow hall. Click, 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 click. It's just I'll never forget that. And I'm so grateful I'm not there anymore. But when I went back into this cell and I sat down, something was different this time. What had just happened, what I had just spoke with my mouth before the Lord moments before this, he met me here and I had a supernatural experience. I'm 170, 80 days sober here right now, so I'm going to tell you, but this was crazy. I went in and I sat down and it smelled like rain. And it was warm and it was humid. And I sat there and I started just weeping bitterly. And I was like, what is this? Is it going to be like a seminary? Like going to prison and I'm like ugly crying with God. And I feel the presence of the Holy Spirit sitting next to me. And he's speaking to me in my spirit like, yeah, son. Yeah, don't be afraid. He's like, I'm here. I'm with you. I got you. To be able to sit there and consciously, because you hear stories in the Bible about like, oh, he appeared in a burning bush. And like, I had a supernatural experience and it changed me. That was my second surrender. I was like, I'm giving it all to you. But where I had not completely surrendered, there was still this fear of being in this prison. I still had this fear. I still had this ego. I still had this control I had not let go of. I let go of a couple of my handfuls of control, but still I was like, Lord, I don't want to be in here for this long. So I ended up going to prison. I ended up going to Bent County Correctional Facility. All I did while I was there is I went to 12-step meetings, I went to church, I worked out, I ate, and I went to little Bible studies. That's all I did for a year and a half. But after a year and a half in, they had just broken up the unit. I was like, here, Hugill, pack it up. And I slept in a little bit. You know how we give a lot of power to morning people. Like I respect the 5 a.m. wake up hustle, but I was staying up till 2 in the morning and waking up at 10 while I was in prison. I am not going to lie to you. So when they wake me up at 7, 8 a.m., I'm wondering exactly what is going on. And I'm like, pack it up. So nerves automatically. I moved 14 times in a year and a half. Don't get comfortable if you're planning on going to prison. It's not going to ever happen. Excuse me. He said, Hugill, pouted. He said, what do you mean pack it up, sir? He said, you're leaving the facility. I'm like, oh, okay. So I go down and get my thing at the bubble. One of my brothers in Christ, he prays over me before we go, and then I end up going. I go and I come back to Colorado Springs, and I go in front of the judge, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? My reconsideration? And originally, like, they didn't even know why or how I came back, because I like had these court dates, and I'd show up for these court dates, and they'd transport me, and I'd come back, and there was no court. They just kept taking me to the courthouse. I was like, what's going on? I talked to my attorney. My attorney was like, why are you back? Did you get more charges? I was all like, I hope not, because that's really possible. But the one thing that I know is that whenever you get a new charge, they take your DNA. They didn't take my DNA. He ended up working it out, and I went in front of the judge to get my sentence reconsidered. It's a 35B is what it's called, a motion to reconsider. And the judge opened it up and said, I don't know why I ever said I'd reconsider this. Shut it, sent me out of there. But you know what ended up happening? I went back a couple of times, and so there's some good news. Taking me to the third time and the final time in this part of my life, I had to surrender my life and my will over to God and start to put my trust in Him. And that is when I came back from that. It took me like 2 weeks. This did not happen instantly. I was just like, Lord, if you need me, if I need to be in prison for these next several years, may your will be done. This was the final bit of surrender that I needed, because I went right back in front of the judge. But instead of going in front of the judge, you know what they did with me? They took me into a holding cell with the district attorney, the person who like wants me to be in prison, my attorney, and a sheriff deputy. And you know what the DA says? He says, Mr. Hugill, I can tell that you've changed. I was like, you're a DA, aren't you? He's like, yeah. He's like, how would you like to go on intense supervised probation? I was like, that would be great. Are you pulling my leg? Like, what's going on here, sir? And so they ended up releasing me early. I ended up getting out and getting into a 2-year specialty, very, very intensive drug court program, or it would have been very intense if I was still getting high. When you're sober and you're willing, there's a whole lot of stuff that changes. Because when you put God first and put your sobriety and your recovery first, there's a whole lot. After you learn how to surrender your will over, magical things can happen. You are willing to do what it takes at that point. So it was great. I was released early. I got a job working at the treatment center I currently work at. I ended up going and getting into fitness. While I was incarcerated, one of the things that really helped me was fitness. Moving my body, it helped. And we've talked about some hormones and stuff today. Like when you're doing these fit things, and I love intensity. I love the endorphins you get after, the body's natural painkiller. I love working out with human beings. When you do something hard with somebody else, you get oxytocin. Yeah. I want to do something really difficult with you together. We're going to build this camaraderie. And now every time I see you smile, I'm like, remember when we did that hard thing together? It's crazy how doing hard stuff you can build camaraderie with people. You get that, you get the dopamine still from it, but then you get the serotonin. If we got dopamines are we're happy right now, we feel good, but serotonin is like the true happiness. Make sure you're getting your vitamin D3 and your magnesium, because that's one of the big ingredients for that. I have core values now, fun and faith. like we've been talking about today, I love fun. If I'm not in a place where I can't be goofy and have fun, you're probably not going to see me hanging out there for long. For sure. I've been blessed since I've been out. I'm going to tell you all about a couple of the blessings that I've had really fast. I ended up going back to the bar I was bouncing at because there was a band that I did security for. And they were like, hey, we know you're sober. We're coming back through. We're touring. Do you want to come? This is right by your birthday. I was like, cool. I went there. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm ready to come in. I went in. Everything was fine. And there was this really beautiful bartender there. I was like, oh, she actually ended up messaging. She's my wife to this day. What my recovery, what my faith has got me is now I have a 5-year-old son named Asher. I have a 3-year-old daughter. Well, she'll be 3 in a week, named Bella. I have a 16-year-old stepdaughter named Sky. And then I have a 16-year-old who was going through some abusive things, and we got guardianship of him. My wife, Nicole, because I have a bunch of felonies, and that's a lot of hoops to jump through. Since then, I've been mentoring people coming out of prison. I don't know why it was so important to me, but I was just like, gosh, I did this. Why can't other people do this? Why can't I help? So I was doing this for like the last several years, and then I was meeting with my buddy, my co-founder of our nonprofit. It's a 501c3 where I said it's called The Bridge. My buddy 2 years ago, he was sitting there and he was in this really hopeless spot, and we just got done doing this little workout and we're on the bikes, and he's just telling me about his life. And I was like, homie, you need some purpose in your life. Like, what are we gonna do, bud? I was like, you know what we're gonna do? I was like, I'm gonna go take you down to Trinidad Correctional Facility. It's a minimum restrictive prison, and we're gonna go work out with these guys. So we went and we go down there and we meet all these guys, and there's all these great, they're all wearing green and they're cool, and we work out, and he was like, oh my gosh, he's like, Dan, the culture, the community down there, like, it's not like that in like fitness gyms out here. I was like, I know, it's cool, right? And he's like, so you just mentor these guys and help them getting out? I was like, yeah. He's like, for free? I was like, yeah. So he had the idea of like, let's make this more impactful. Let's start a nonprofit out of it. Let's see if we can get some people to have some buy-in to help us so that we can be more impactful. So The Bridge, my little organization, what we do now is we have peer recovery coaches. We have them act as mentors. We really look for the ones that are formerly incarcerated, the ones that have had like addiction problems and drugs and just, domestic violence. Like, we want your problems because if you've overcome them, now you can help these other people. So we have that. We have boxing, we do CrossFit, we do weightlifting. We add this thing that a lot of people like to do. Like, remember how I said the camaraderie for doing hard things together? We do hard things together so that we know we don't have to do hard things alone. Yeah. So it's just magical. And people I've had a couple of guys in prison that they'll ask me, they're like, they didn't believe that I got sober. They didn't believe that I gave my life to God. And I had a couple of conversations. And one of the ones that they asked me, they're like, Dan, you used to be so angry. Why are you not angry anymore? And I found the answer to this in a book. I'm gonna give you a quote from Brent Hansen, this book called Unoffendable. He says, when you're living in the reality of the forgiveness you've been extended, you just don't get angry at people as easily. Right? That hit me so hard. For sure. And then we got all these guys we're working with getting out of prison. And it's like, this takes me, I had to throw. It's a Teddy Roosevelt, but I heard it through John C. Maxwell. It's people don't care to know till they know that you care. Sure, you heard that before, and that's so profound and it's so true. So building rapport with people, going back into the prisons and being like, look, I was just here. I was at this facility. I don't care if you're in a gang. I don't care what you're doing. Come get with us. So, gosh, I draw strength from the Lord. I have a lot of y'all have probably heard of start with why and why power. I have one big why in my life right now, and this is that I'm going to be done after this. My one big why right now is my son Asher. He turned 5. I'm going to try not to cry. A couple weeks ago. I'm very into martial arts. I'm a 2nd-degree black belt in Shaolin Kung Fu. I've been boxing for 4 years, and I do catch wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, among a few other little handfuls of less experienced martial arts. And I let my family and my son see that I do this. So my son at his birthday, he blows out this candle. And my wife goes, what did you wish for? And he's like, I want to be a real warrior like Daddy.
That's awesome.
You know what that feels like? For a dad who's been through what I've been through, that felt good. from somebody so innocent that sees me and doesn't see any of the bad things that I've done. He just sees the good. I was like, that's redemption. That's redemption. Thank you, Lord. So everybody, my name is Dan. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you so much. Right on. Oh, thank you, Tommy. Thank you. Thank you so much.